The Galactic Federation's most classified document was not a weapons schematic. It was not a strategic war plan. It was not the location of hidden fleets or the details of covert operations or any of the things that people assumed were the most dangerous secrets a galactic civilization could keep. It was a list, 47 items long. Each item described a category of thing that the Federation had collectively decided, across 300 years of careful deliberation, should never under any circumstances be given to humanity. Not because humanity was hostile, not because humanity was untrustworthy, but because the Federation's most senior strategic analyst had spent 300 years watching humans and had reached a conclusion that they found both admirable and deeply concerning, that humans, given any tool, any resource, any piece of information or technology or strategic advantage, would use it in ways that nobody had anticipated and that could not be undone. The list was not called the Humanity Restriction List officially. Officially, it was designated Strategic Resource. Management Protocol 7, everyone who knew about it called it the Do Not Give Humans List. Director Vial of the Federation Strategic Council had maintained the list for 19 years. He had added 3 items and removed none. He reviewed it quarterly with the particular attention of someone who understood that the list was not just a policy document but an ongoing assessment of what humanity was capable of, because every item on the list represented something that had been considered and found to be too dangerous to risk. He was reviewing it on a Tuesday when his communications officer interrupted him. "Sir," she said, "we have a situation." He looked up. "The Vorrkai have crossed the Meridian Line," she said. "Full fleet engagement. They have taken Station Kappa 7 and they are moving toward the Outer Reach colonies." Vial looked at her for a moment. "How many ships?" he said. 417, she said. "Sir, our response fleet is 312. The room was quiet. Vial looked at the list on his desk. He thought about what was on it. He thought about why it was on it. Then he thought about 417 Vorrkai warships moving toward colonies that held 22 billion people and a Federation response fleet that was outnumbered by 105 ships. He closed the list. "Get me the human ambassador," he said. Ambassador Dara Osei had been in her current posting for 6 years. She was 53 years old, had spent 30 years in diplomatic service across 11 different postings, and had developed over those 30 years a particular skill that she considered her most valuable professional asset: the ability to tell the difference between a call that was urgent and a call that was urgent and significant. Most urgent calls were not significant. Urgency was easy to generate. Significance was rarer. When Director Vale's face appeared on her screen at 0340 hour station time, she identified it within 4 seconds as both. Not from his expression. Vial was a professional and his expression was professionally neutral. From his eyes. Vial had the eyes of someone who had just made a decision that cost him something and was not yet certain the cost was worth it. "Ambassador," he said, "we have a situation that requires an immediate conversation." "I know about the Vorrkai," she said. He stopped. "We detected the fleet movement 6 hours ago," she said. "We have been tracking the Vorrkai buildup for approximately 8 months. We assessed the Meridian Line crossing as likely within a 2-week window. It happened at the earlier end of that window." She paused. "We have been preparing a briefing for the Federation. We were going to deliver it this morning." Vial looked at her for a long moment. "You have been tracking this for 8 months, he said. "Yes, and you did not." "We shared preliminary assessments through standard channels 4 months ago," she said. "They were received and filed. We assessed that the full intelligence picture would require a more direct conversation, and we were scheduling that conversation." She paused. "Events have accelerated the timeline," Ambassador Vale said carefully. "We are outnumbered. 105 ships, 22 billion people in the Outer Reach colonies." He paused. "I am calling to ask for help." Osei looked at him for a moment. "I know," she said. "That is why I'm going to give it to you." She paused. "But I need you to understand something first. What I am about to share with you, the capabilities I am about to reveal, will change how the Federation sees humanity. Permanently. There is no going back from this conversation." "I understand," Vale said. "I need you to actually understand," she said, "not in the diplomatic sense. In the practical sense, after this conversation, The do not give humans list becomes irrelevant, because you are going to see what we already have. The silence. On the bridge of the Federation command station was absolute Vale. Stared at her. "You know about the list," he said, quietly. "We have known about the list for 11 years, she said. "We know every item on it. We know when each item was added and the reasoning behind each addition." She paused. "We have never violated it. Not one item. Not once." She looked at him steadily. "We want you to understand that. Before you see what comes next, we want you to know that we have had access to every restricted category for years, and we have not used it because we understood why the restrictions existed, and we respected the reasoning." Another pause. "We are asking you to remember that in the next hour." "What happens in the next hour?" Vile said. "You see what 300 years of underestimating us has missed," she said, "and we start actually working together." What Ose shared in the next hour was transmitted simultaneously to every senior Federation commander with authority over the Outer Reach defense. It began with the intelligence picture. 8 months of Vorrkai monitoring, fleet movements, supply chain analysis, command structure assessment, tactical doctrine review. It was comprehensive in a way that the Federation's own intelligence on the Vorrkai was not. More detailed, more current, more deeply sourced, built on a monitoring infrastructure that should not have been able to produce what it was producing at humanity's known technological level. Commander after commander went quiet as they received it. Then came the second part. The second part was not intelligence. It was capability disclosure, a document that the Federation's strategic analyst would spend 3 weeks reviewing afterward and would ultimately classify at the highest level available to them. Not because it was a threat, but because it required significant reassessment of assumptions that had been foundational to Federation strategic planning for 2 centuries. Humanity had ships that were not on any registry, not a few. Not a secret reserve fleet of modest size. A substantial force, developed quietly over 40 years. Built in facilities that were technically within human territorial space, but had been configured to avoid the sensor profiles that Federation monitoring systems would flag as military. Construction. The ships were different from humanity's registered fleet in ways that the Federation's engineers, reviewing the specifications, found difficult to believe. Not more powerful in the straightforward sense. Not larger weapons or stronger shields or faster drives. Different in design philosophy in a way that reflected 40 years of building for a specific purpose. They had been built to fight outnumbered. Every system, every design choice, every tactical innovation, built around the assumption that they would face superior numbers and needed to function effectively under those conditions. The Federation's ships were built for the engagements that the Federation expected to fight. Fleet on fleet, comparable numbers. The kind of engagement that 300 years of galactic power balance had made the standard scenario. Humanity's hidden fleet had been built for a different scenario. The scenario of a species that expected to be outnumbered. That had always expected to be outnumbered. That had spent 40 years engineering around that expectation until the expectation was not a disadvantage, but an advantage, because a fleet built to fight outnumbered, when it was not outnumbered, had capabilities that no one had designed against. The third part of the disclosure was a proposal. Not a demand, not a condition. A proposal, offered with the same directness that Ose brought to everything. Humanity would deploy the unregistered fleet to the Outer Reach. Combined with the Federation's 312 ships, the numbers would shift significantly. The tactical doctrine humanity had developed for outnumbered engagement, applied to an engagement where they were not outnumbered, would produce effects that Ose's document described with careful precision and that the Federation's commanders read with the particular attention of people encountering something that changed what they thought was possible. In exchange, humanity asked for one thing, not territory, not resources, not formal alliance status or treaty rights or any of the strategic currencies that major powers exchanged. They asked for an honest conversation about what they were and what role they would play going forward. "We have been the galaxy's best-kept secret for 200 years," Ose said, when the document had been transmitted and the silence on the channel had gone on long enough to communicate what it needed to communicate. "Not because we hid, because nobody looked carefully enough." She paused. We are done being a secret. We would like to be something more useful. The battle for the outer reach lasted 9 days. What the Federation's commanders experienced during those 9 days would be discussed in military academies for generations, not because of the outcome, though the outcome was significant, but because of the quality of what they witnessed. Human ships fought differently from anything the Federation had encountered. Not recklessly. Every action was precise, calculated, the product of tactical doctrine that had clearly been refined over a long period against extensive simulation. But with a willingness to accept risk that the Federation's commanders found initially alarming, and ultimately understood, was not recklessness, but something else. A relationship with danger that was different from the Federation's. A comfort with operating at the edge of what was survivable, that came from a species that had been operating at that edge for its entire history. On day 3, a human captain named Reyes took her ship through a gap in the Vorrkai formation that the Federation's tactical computers had flagged as unsurvivable, and had come out the other side having destroyed 3 Vorrkai warships and destabilized the formation's entire left flank. The maneuver had been executed with the calm precision of someone who had run it in simulation many times and knew exactly what the margin was, and had decided the margin was sufficient. On day 5, the human fleet coordinator, in a position that had not existed in Federation doctrine and had been created specifically for this engagement, reorganized the combined fleet's positioning in real time during an active engagement in ways that the Federation's admirals initially resisted and then stopped resisting when the outcomes began to demonstrate why the positions mattered. On day 7, with the Vorrkai fleet beginning to show the signs of an engagement that was going longer and costing more than they had planned for, a human diplomatic officer attached to the military command transmitted a message to the Vorrkai fleet command. The message was not a surrender demand. It was not a threat. It was an assessment, precise, accurate, and clearly based on intelligence that the Vorrkai command should not have believed humanity possessed. Of the Vorrkai's current strategic position, their likely outcomes under 3 different scenarios, and a 4th scenario that the message described as the one that produced the best outcome for the Vorrkai given their actual interests rather than their stated objectives. The Vorrkai Fleet Command took 11 hours to respond. Their response was a request for a ceasefire in terms. On day 9, the terms were agreed. They were, the Federation's negotiators noted afterward, more favorable to the Vorrkai than anyone had expected, not because humanity had been soft in the negotiation, but because the terms had been constructed around the Vorrkai's actual interests rather than the Federation's desire for a punitive outcome, and actual interests turned out to be easier to satisfy than symbolic victories. The Vorrkai got something real. The Federation got something durable. The outcome held in ways that the Federation's previous negotiations with the Vorrkai had not been reviewed. The terms and thought about the do not give humans list. Sitting in his office, he thought about 19 years of maintaining it. 47 items, 3 additions, 0 removals. He thought about 8 months of intelligence that humanity had developed independently, about 40 years of ships built to fight outnumbered, about a diplomatic officer who had sent a message to an enemy, fleet command in the middle of a battle and gotten a ceasefire request 11 hours later. He thought about what the list had assumed, that the danger in giving humanity resources was what humanity would do with them, that the risk was in the giving. He thought about what the last 9 days had shown him, that humanity had not needed the giving, that they had been building quietly and patiently and entirely within the bounds of what was permitted for 200 years, that the list had not slowed them down, that the list had perhaps in some way he had not yet fully worked out, made them better, by requiring them to develop everything themselves rather than receiving it, by ensuring that every capability they had was one they fully understood because they had built it from first principles. He picked up the list. He thought about removing all 47 items. He decided against it, not because the items were still necessary, because the document had become something different from what it had started as. It was no longer a restriction. It was a record of 200 years of watching a species prepare for a moment that had now arrived, and of all the things that humanity had managed to develop without needing to be given anything, He filed it under historical documents. Then he called Osei. She answered immediately. It was 200 hours her time, and she answered immediately, which told him something about how she had spent the night. The terms were accepted, he said. I know, she said. I have been following. The honest conversation, he said, that you asked for. I would like to begin it. She looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression shifted slightly. Not surprise, but something that might have been the release of something that had been held for a long time. Good, she said. I have been preparing for it for about 20 years. He almost smiled. I believe you, he said. Where would you like to start? She asked. He thought about 47 items. About 200 years. About ships built to fight outnumbered and intelligence networks that nobody had seen. And diplomatic officers who ended battles with 11-hour messages. From the beginning, he said, I think we have missed quite a lot. Yes, she said. You have, she paused. But you are asking now. That is what matters. She was right about that. It was, Vale thought, a very human thing to say.